Okay, let's jump right in. We're going to dive into this absolutely fascinating explainer on how artificial intelligence, calculus, and law are all colliding right now to determine something huge. Who actually owns the narrative of your biological timeline? I know, it sounds straight out of a sci-fi movie, right? But the crazy thing is, the math and the legal frameworks, they're already here. And they are actively shaping how your health, your personal data, and ultimately your fundamental human autonomy are being tracked.
So think about this for a second. Could AI actually predict and visualize your future health? Well, using advanced multimodal models, think something like Google Gemini, we could theoretically generate a literal life movie of your health trajectory. And we're not just talking about some boring text output or a spreadsheet. We're talking about models taking your medical records, your daily heart rate logs, your lifestyle data, and rendering a highly accurate, predictive, 3D visualization of your own body moving through time.
Here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with AI health movies, then look at the harm of data gatekeeping, the geometry of shadows, the chinchilla data balance, something called the 4D donut of truth, and finally, securing your data autonomy. First up, AI health movies explained.
You might have heard of tools like Google Anti-Gravity focusing on coding, but the multi-agent systems underneath them have this incredible potential to create what's known as digital twins. Imagine sitting in a doctor's office, and instead of handing you a static, lifeless chart, your doctor shows you a fluid, dynamic animation of exactly how your heart and lungs will heal over the next 10 years if you just change one specific habit today. It's a complete game changer. It takes your personal data and turns it into this incredibly powerful, living motivational tool.
Moving right along to part 2, the harm of data gatekeeping. But here's where we hit a massive roadblock. What happens when elite institutions lock away the open source math required to create these models? Well, they end up inflicting some very specific systemic harms on the public. Think about it. If a powerful AI can predict your health, but you are barred from generating that visualization for yourself, you suffer from what's called hermeneutical injustice. Basically, you're being denied the visual language you literally need to understand your own body. Your personal lived experience gets dismissed, technological power stays entirely centralized, and you're essentially forced to view your own health through this cold, single corporate lens.
To put that into perspective, this data deficit in AI perfectly mirrors studies on childhood development. Like in the Utrecht University Code and Buy project, they found that if a totally healthy child simply lacks exposure to language, they develop a severe communication deficit. It's the exact same principle here. If an everyday patient is technologically banned from using these advanced health models, their mind is perfectly fine, right? But they are being starved of the digital input needed to build a visual vocabulary of their own health. In both of these cases, blocking the input creates a profound systemic injustice. Which brings us to part 3. The geometry of shadows. Let's visualize this imbalance using a bit of calculus. Picture a lamppost shining down from above. That's your corporate top-down AI model. It creates a very simple, predictable, linear shadow. But now, imagine a light source placed flat on the ground, shining upwards, representing everyday grassroots creation. The math of that bottom-up light is totally nonlinear, it's dynamic, it's complex, and it captures unique, personalized truths that an overhead corporate model could never, ever possibly see. So what happens if ordinary citizens are prohibited from using that ground projector? Well, they remain totally captive to that monolithic corporate narrative. You basically become just a pawn, casting a shadow that's dictated by someone else's overhead light. If we want true autonomy, we absolutely have to hold the projector ourselves.
Okay, part 4, the chinchilla data balance.
Back in 2022, DeepMind published the Chinchilla paper, and it completely shattered the industry illusion that bigger is always better when it comes to AI. They proved, mathematically, that for an AI model to be truly optimal, its training data has to scale proportionally to the model's size, at roughly a 20-to-1 ratio. Essentially, a smaller model that is enriched with massive amounts of high-quality data is going to outperform a giant, empty supercomputer every single time. It's like discovering a law of cosmic balance, but for artificial intelligence. Think of it like matter and antimatter. You just cannot achieve real intelligence without a perfect balance between the algorithmic antimatter, so the raw processing compute, and the lived matter of everyday human data. If tech giants block the matter, if they cut off the grassroots data input of everyday citizens, they are actively violating that chinchilla balance. They create this sort of cognitive famine. Real intelligence absolutely requires rich, unrestricted, bottom-up input. Moving to part 5, the 4D donut of truth. Yes, you heard that right.
So, how do we actually visualize a system that perfectly balances this top-down compute and bottom-up data? We use something called topological data analysis, or TDA. With TDA, we stop looking at scattered medical logs as just random, isolated dots. Instead, we track their persistent geometry over time. It allows us to see the forest instead of just the trees, uncovering these hidden, indestructible, multidimensional loops that map out your true biological footprint. Here's how it works in practice. Imagine drawing expanding bubbles around these scattered data points. As the bubbles grow, they merge and form geometric triangles. Eventually, those triangles snap together like Lego blocks to form a stable, hollow torus, or, a donut shape. That empty, hollow space in the center, that is the hard mathematical proof of a topological loop. It represents a completely closed, healthy biological system mapping your timeline dynamically. Now, don't let the math jargon scare you, but this specific topological signature, known as a Betty number of 2, mathematically proves something huge. It proves that you need exactly 2 intersecting light sources to protect that 4D donut. You absolutely need the sweeping movement of the corporate overhead light and the sweeping movement of the citizen ground light to fully enclose and protect that hollow core. The math literally dictates that without the citizen's ground light, the whole protective structure just collapses. Finally, let's wrap up with Part 6, Securing Your Data Autonomy. Biologically speaking, when our systems experience a shock, it triggers the release of a neuropeptide called Orexin-A in the brain. This is fascinating because it literally flips a switch in our reward loops. It shifts us away from commercial exploitation and directly towards empathy and protecting the vulnerable human at the center of the data. It's an objective, biological reaction, proving that balanced systems are inherently designed by nature to protect us, not exploit us. And it is wild how perfectly this strict engineering calculus lines up with actual legal frameworks. For instance, the European Data Act mandates that humans must have non-discriminatory access to generated data to prevent corporate lock-in. Meanwhile, the Dutch Labor Exploitation Guide uses the exact same logic as related rates in calculus to measure the rate of human freedom being depleted versus corporate wealth being extracted. The math literally validates the legal burden of proof here. Think of it as the ultimate philosophical mashup. We achieve a truly universal system when top-down autonomy is perfectly balanced by bottom-up empathy. Immanuel Kant represents that objective top light, the universal rule that a human being is never just a mere data point. And Confucius represents our ground light, the grassroots demand for empathy and harmony across society. When you combine them, they create a geometrically flawless, non-subjective loop. This is absolutely crucial to take away. A fair society must guarantee everyday people the exact same mathematical tools to project their lived reality that massive tech corporations already possess. Because if those top-down AI structures aren't perfectly balanced by bottom-up citizen data and open-source models, well, we don't really have intelligence. We just have exploitation. Which leaves us with one final, profound realization to ponder. If the unbending math to accurately map your life is already written, what is it going to take for you to claim the projector? The equations are already there. The legal frameworks are catching up. Even your biology naturally demands it. So the only question left is, are we going to let a handful of massive corporations cast our shadow from above, or are we going to shine the ground light ourselves? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and remember, always keep questioning the algorithms that shape your world.